Season 1 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Carl Haley, Daniel Murphy, and Douglas Dollars, who reminds you to be present, be loving, and that life moves really fast. Bit about the state of internet radio in 1999. What did you even envision in that era when you would think, can you do radio on the internet?
I knew that we could do it because we had been doing it for about a year and a half prior. We were broadcasting at the University of Southern California student radio station, KSCR. And I just started hearing about the idea of internet radio, but I wasn't really that hip or savvy to it, much less kind of the internet as a whole. I would use it for emailing and, little bits and pieces of web browsing, but started hearing about the idea of internet radio maybe in 1996 or so, and thought it would be great to have our student radio station have a broader reach, have an international reach. We were really kind of dinky little radio station in downtown Los Angeles that
AM only, right?
It was FM.
Oh, FM then. You were there before they went only AM.
Correct. And it wasn't, today we were using the term, less than legal for sure. It was a less than legal kind of affair. But it was funded and operated by the university. And so we decided we wanted to have, one, a safety net in case the FCC came after us, which happened, and two, a way to reach beyond this small kind of area of Los Angeles. So started exploring what internet radio meant as far as the nuts and bolts in the broadcasting and, knocking on strange hidden server shacks at the university and finding the person who ran the Real Media Server, USC, which was, in some strange computer lab. And at that point, the university was a high-tech institution, but a high-tech institution didn't mean it was so net savvy. And so, did a lot of research, found out how it worked, and successfully got KSCR online. We started broadcasting to maybe 2 students every month, and built that up more and more. And that's how we kind of learned how to make it work. That doesn't mean that at that point things sounded too great. I
remember Real Media. Ooh.
Yeah, I give the analogy of tin cans, and that's kind of what the radio sounded like at that point. So when we launched Dublab so we started broadcasting at the university in 1998, and then we launched Dublab in 1999 in September, and we were streaming a 56K signal that included video and audio. Video was about 3/4 of that. So our audio feed just sounded like you were listening to an answering machine outgoing message underwater with your ears plugged full of tissue and probably some weird, hearing disorder thrown in there. So it sounded pretty rough, but it was, I think at that point there was a bit of magic, and it was interesting for people to be able to plug in and hear something coming from across the world and to see something coming from across the world. And though our video made the audio sound kind of, less than stellar, it was still kind of worth it. It was worth it to give people a little bit of insight. And that was, one of the differences in conventional radio. Of course, you don't see what's happening behind the scenes. So it was nice to be able to, lift the veil a bit.
It's Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall, and listeners, allow me to introduce you to Mark McNeill, better known as Frosty, co-founder and creative captain at Dublab, which specializes in what they call future roots. We'll get into it. It's an internet radio collective, and their music, if you've never heard them, it's like they reside at the point where the very old meets the very new in music, where the very traditional meets the very experimental. And it's also the point where everything sounds completely different, yet the undercurrent, you feel like it has the same undercurrent. I don't know. Mark, how well am I doing describing the music? Anything close to how you envision it?
That sounds right. Yeah, let me write it on our website now so I'll quote you. That's it. I mean, the whole idea is a broad scope.
But broad scope, people think often of college radio, where it's something literally completely different all day long, and maybe they struggle to attain an audience because of it. Dublab, the inner consistency is strong but hard to describe.
We try to kind of, as curators, curate the people who are involved, curate the selectors who we bring into the fold. And these people,
curation of curators, then.
Exactly. It's almost like I always think of we're DJing DJs, and being able to bring people into a collective who have really deep knowledge. They all have their kind of niche or mini niches, but it's all somehow connected along a common kind of current. And it's hard to exactly pinpoint what that is, but I think the idea of what we've always strived for is to think of, the progressive music that's been made over the centuries. People who are making music usually outside of commercial context, making music for themselves as well as for other people to kind of have that bit of elevation in their lives, whether it's hearing something that makes them cry and feeling emotion through music, or hearing something that makes them dance. So really music that touches people, made by creative people. And when we started in 1999 and we're clicking those boxes on the Real Media server and all these different players and internet radio tuners that were popping up, we always had that choice of, okay, are we alternative? Are we rock? Are we college? Are we eclectic? Are we electronic? Are we techno? Are we dance? Are we ambient? Or, on and on and on. And that's hard for any creative person to kind of pigeonhole themselves and be defined by a genre. So we decided internally to kind of coin our own genre and create something that doesn't necessarily, if you're hearing it for the first time, mean a whole lot. You're not able to define exactly what we're doing, but that was the point. We wanted people to be enticed and then to explore further. So the idea was this idea of future roots music. And the idea of future roots music is just as you said, it's the idea of playing the newest music frequently before it's available to the world. This is music fresh out of the studio, which used to happen back in the day on, radio stations. You'd hear legend and lore of, radio station in Detroit that would get a Motown cut straight off of the record pressing lathe and play it on the radio that night before it was available. That happens here, where people are making music frequently in their home studios or bedroom studios, bringing it here and playing it. And some of that music's never commercially released. So playing that really kind of forward thinking, moving sound, but then also realizing that sound and, all music really is not created in a vacuum. That music and art is derivative. And I mean that in the best possible way, that it's always influenced by something. So let's highlight and showcase those influences, not in an overt manner, but just in a relaxed, fun manner where we can connect those dots from that newest music all the way back to things that may have influenced it, and to try to do it in a way that makes sense and is relaxed. And so we try to do that. It's not in every, hour. It's not in every show. Sometimes it is, but if you look at the music across the entire kind of scope of what we're playing, then you're hearing music from kind of the earliest moments of recorded music history to what's coming tomorrow and the next year. So trying to connect those dots and, give people a really wide view of sound.
Now, we're sitting here in the headquarters, in the secret, undisclosed, Hollywoodish location of your headquarters. We are, I look around, I see a substantial operation here around me. I've read that half your listeners are actually outside the United States, even not even just outside of Los Angeles, but the country. And you've got so much original content as far as shows go, and there are happenings, there are films, there are albums. I mean, Dublab has become. I mean, when did you know that it was not a project, but something more all-consuming? How long was it after you were clicking those real audio boxes you realized, well, this is going to be something more than a proof of concept now?
I think, it was pretty early on. We decided it's anytime that you take a leap of faith, you have hope, at least, that what you're doing is going to last, and even if it doesn't last, it's being bold and trying to jump in and trying something new and different. So we quit our jobs. This is a small group of people, but we decided to give it a shot and try it out. So at that point, there was the hope that what we were doing would, if not last for a while, at least positively impact the people that we're trying to reach. Mm. And the goal was always, the thing that blew my mind through the internet and through the power of being worldwide. And sometimes, even tongue-in-cheek, the idea of universally, because, hey, maybe someone beyond this earth is listening and somehow tuned in. But if we can open someone up to music that they haven't heard before, and music that matters to them, and music that really helps provide that kind of epiphany for them, that turning moment, that moment of understanding that there's more out there than many commercial entities want you to think. It's moving beyond, the narrow cast, the music to sell hamburgers, and moving into the music to, change people's lives and keep them happy. So that was always the hope. And if we could do that and were able to do that, then I was happy, and it was worth the risk and the time and the energy. But always the hope was that we could keep it going for a while. So it's really, it was honestly thinking about the future, but really just trying to learn every day. And the great thing about internet radio at that point to us was the fact that we could make it up as we went along. There was no real guidebook. There was the idea of radio, which many of us had been involved in traditional radio, mostly on the college and public radio and community radio sides. But with this form, there were things that we could try that we could just, make up as we went along. And that was really the fun of it. So I think that just the day by day, as long as we're learning and discovering new sounds and having fun with it, then we're fine. Even if it ends tomorrow, that's okay. And by now, the idea of having been able to do it for a while, I feel like, okay, even if it ended any moment, we gave it a go, and we had a lot of fun doing it.
Anybody who tunes in and listens to your show, for example, Celsius Drop on Dublab, they will get a sense of, it says a lot about Dublab. The word is not a sense of what music you like, because it's more of a sense of sort of your personal musical explorations or the directions you've gone in musically. I mean, when I think about Dublab listeners, I think of people for whom they're not necessarily pointing to things they like and say, you'll like this, but they're always expanding outward in terms of the musical map. They're sort of, I picture their awareness as sort of spreading across the musical map, and the goal maybe for someone who is a Dublab type, shall we say, is to get that awareness spread as far and wide as possible. How do you think about it in terms of what you listen to? Is it about finding what you like, or is it about, or has it been about just getting to be aware of as much as possible so you can know what's out there, and so you can listen in an informed way to music? And this is getting to sound complicated, but do you see a distinction there between the sort of ways of listening that I've hinted at?
Did you ever see the film Cave of Forgotten Dreams?
Oh, of course. I've seen every Werner Herzog film. How could you assume? Yes, of course.
There's the fellow who's he's the head of the French Perfume Society or something. He's going around, he's sniffing, trying to find a cave, and trying to explore in that way. And I feel like the idea, that analogy has just kind of popped in mind because we're out there and we're kind of probing around, and part of it, the thrill is in the search, and the thrill is in the process of searching. And when you stumble upon something that goes way beyond your expectations, when that pinhole becomes a universe and becomes this, giant cavernous offering of sound, then those are the moments that fuel your journey further. And I think that with myself and everybody who's involved in Dublab, they're doing it because they get that thrill out of hearing new sounds. And the recorded music that's available around the world, and now the recorded music that's really at our fingertips and that's available through, the power of the internet, or through just the interconnected nature of fellow explorers being able to share discoveries with each other. When you stumble upon those worlds, it's thrilling. So you're able to journey out there and find these sounds. For what we do at Dublab, the point has never been to say, hey, I found this, I'm going to keep it to myself. But, the fun is to pass it along and to say, I've stumbled upon this treasure and I want to share it with you, because what good is it, going to do if it's sitting in a dark room? So we really want to be able to just wholeheartedly and enthusiastically share music with people. And so what I really enjoy is that every year I never know what new genre is going to pop up. And that could be a genre that's a newly formed musical genre that's never come before, or it could be a strange, kind of micro genre that I've not really been hip to, or music from, a hidden corner of the globe that is just absolutely intriguing. So,
what are some of the moments that come to mind, just as the times when you discovered something new, whether a new artist, album, part of the world, a tradition, a recording, and thought, wow, a large chunk of the musical world that I'm going to explore as hard as I can just opened up before me?
I guess I've never, the interesting thing is I did not grow up being, a really big music head. I was a music fan. I appreciated music. I liked music, but I wasn't someone who was out there seeking out music. It was kind of a passive experience for me. It wasn't what was so central in my life. But to me, the idea of having that light bulb moment that happened, that in a way that happened probably for many, many people, and was hearing the Beatles and having this world of sound open up.
At what age did this happen?
It was in high school, late high school. I was definitely a late bloomer when it came to music. And so that blew my mind. Hearing the different textures, hearing the kind of far out nature of it, but presented in a pop form, and not being able to fully kind of decipher what exactly was happening was what intrigued me. So that was a big moment. And then hearing a lot of really interesting, when I went to college, kind of electronic music, ambient and kind of experimental music of the early 90s really turned me on, because it was so alien to me. It was such a different form of music than I had really heard before. So those moments are really exciting and really formative, and made me realize, okay, well, if, I heard these sounds, what else is out there? And I started getting hungry to explore and to discover music. The next big one was working at a classical radio station. I was working at a station called KUSC, which is the classical station at the University of Southern California. And they basically asked me to throw away the contents of a room. So I was a student worker, and I went to the room.
Piece of grunt work, essentially. They gave you, throw this all away.
Total grunt work. And I strolled down to the room, open it up. Okay, it's full of records. Close the door. Hey, you know, the room that you wanted me to clear out, you know, that room's full of records. So did you tell me the wrong room? You know, which room should I clear out? Oh no, that's the room, please, you know.
But it's full of records.
I told him that. I said, it's full of records, you know. I said, please, you know, okay, there's a dolly, just throw them in the dumpster in the back. And I sat there and just kind of dumbfounded and said, hey, you know, could I take these home? And they were just overjoyed. Please, please, please take them home. Take them home. If you could, that would be amazing.
How many records? Or hundreds?
It was
thousands?
Probably about 1,500 records.
1,500, wow.
And so I went back to the room, and I hadn't even flipped through them before. Started flipping through the records, and I came across these Nonesuch World Explorer Series records, which I had never really known at that point. I didn't really know what world music was intimately, and so I started to dig into those. I found also John Cage records, Terry Riley records.
Were these water damaged or something, or they just didn't have a use for them?
Didn't have a use for them. They had changed to from LP library to a CD, purely digital library. So I basically found these records, brought them home, and just started diving into incredible sounds. And that really blew my mind. And the idea of, you know, kind of non-Western music and music beyond our shores here made me understand that there was, even beyond just genres available here, there was music that was just so unique and true to human spirit that was out there. So those kind of moments really do it. And so we're trying to give listeners those moments ourselves, you know, and that's kind of a repayment in a way for the great moments. I believe in musical karma for sure. And if we can kind of feed back into the idea of positive music karma, then that's a great thing.
Now, those 60s Nonesuch records, like the ones you found in the KUSC dumping room or the room to be dumped, you know, they're getting reissued now, or they've been getting reissued, and then people pay, you know, decent prices, more than free for them, certainly. And I've listened to them a lot myself and enjoyed them. And I do wonder, you know, with if you have recordings of ancient Cambodian music or recordings of John Cage, I mean, it sounds like you just put those on, sat down, and instantly were kind of right there with them. Like, wow, this is cool stuff. It's not the same for everybody, it seems like. Some people feel a native resistance to that, but it seems like, I hate to put it like this, but sometimes I feel like, geez, don't I have a duty to take friends who resist this stuff and show them how good it can be? I mean, do you see the Dublab mission as partially like that? Like, actually listen to this stuff, and if you don't think you like it, well, maybe you're approaching it wrong. Or is it like for the people who already would be into it, for the people who would, if they came upon that room of records, put them on, sit down, and tune in immediately? I mean, do you see both of those as being potential Dublab audiences, or is it mostly for the people who are kind of natively in their mind already there? You know what I mean?
We definitely don't want to push anything on anyone. I think the idea is, you know, and the respective different strokes for different folks kind of thing. We want to be able to share music that we truly love and understand that, you know, not every sound is for every person. And not only that, even if that, you know, in your daily life, you're not in the mood to listen to, you know, a particular song at a particular moment necessarily. So the idea of just really making it available, we're more and more trying to give people options and trying to allow them to experience, you know, music that they're able to pick and to find. We're working on some behind the scenes things that will kind of allow people, you know, more on a mood and genre basis to discover, you know, specific Dublab offerings. But we've always felt that our main goal is it's not to evangelize, but it's to understand that people's minds are wider than they're kind of given credit for, and then most media gives credit for. Most media, however, as I said before, is sharing music to sell hamburgers, and that's a really blunt kind of generalized statement, but it's the idea of, they're answering to the advertisers. Public radio's different. They're answering to the listeners. And that's the model that we're really interested in. We're really interested in keeping our listeners happy. And new listeners and new people that we're able to reach, we give them the benefit of the doubt that they have, if not the history of, then they have the capacity for enjoying really wide culture. Most people that I know, most friends, I go to their house and they don't have one type of book on their bookshelf. They don't have one type of food in their pantry. And so why limit music to one very particular type of music? Right. So we really try to keep it broad. And if someone really has an aversion to it, that's fine. I mean, people like Lady Gaga for a reason. And that reason could be very valid, So we're not trying to tell people what to like, but we're offering an opportunity for people to hear something different. And you're right in saying there are people who are tuned into that. And there's people who are tuned into that already. The way that people usually come across Dublab, and many people find us through friends. And we don't advertise. We put things out into the world that are heartfelt, that we're really putting a lot of positive energy into. And someone might hear that and then pass it along to a friend. And that's the best kind of that hand-to-hand grassroots kind of people-powered growth is what we're interested in. When we started in the midst of the internet boom that was a bubble, we saw these companies starting and trying to be the next best thing, the greatest, thing the world has ever seen, but not really based on any kind of solid foundation. And so our goal is always to just grow little by little and stay little and operate in the manner of the people that really inspire us, the organizations, the individual radio DJs, John Peel, for instance, the groups like Folkways recordings, things like that have, real passion and a mission to offer music that might have the capacity to change the world. And changing the world could be playing something someone gets really excited about and they feel overjoyed at hearing something and that, changes their path in life, or, they even just have a better day and, are nicer to their community or something. So
from what I've heard, a few of those internet bubble companies in the 90s and early 2000s, they would have liked Dublab to have gotten unsmall quickly. I mean, you took a few meetings with these guys. Is that right?
Sure. I like free lunch.
Good lunches in those days? I mean, what was a real internet bubble lunch you would get taken to?
Man, you had to just filter. You had to turn the filter on and focus on the lunch. You had to change the subject. There's lots of easy ways to change the subject.
They didn't understand what Dublab was, maybe is what it came down to, or they had an idea about what they wanted. Maybe we can buy you and use you for something. Was that it?
We didn't understand what we wanted or what we were. We understood what we wanted. We did understand what we wanted to do, and we wanted to take that journey on our own. We wanted to move at our own pace, and our pace wasn't the pace that these people wanted. And so we'd take meetings with these people and, we'd hear lots of, kind of hot phrases, synergy and vertical content networks and platforms and all these things. Like, hey man, we just want to play great music for people. And so we were trying to stay focused on that. It was fresh out of school, and some of these meetings were before we broadcast 1 second of music. and these people are throwing around offers of millions of dollars, but it's millions of funny dollars and funny money and empty promises. But I feel like we were really focused on that grassroots approach. We wanted the joy of it came in the slow unfolding of it, and the joy of it came in creating something piece by piece. And there were moments where we were tempted to go the other way, but it would have all been done. We would have not been sitting here right now.
Right.
For sure.
Pets.com of an operation.
Or be nothing. I mean, it most likely would have disappeared with everything else that disappeared in the burst of the internet bubble. Most of those companies do not exist anymore. And the companies that offered us money, which was mostly in the form of equity, they do not exist. So I'm absolutely confident in saying that if we had accepted any of the offers that were put on the table, we wouldn't have lasted. We would have been around for 6 months to a year. So I'm glad we didn't,
Now, doing the sort of managing the growth of Dublab in the gradual way that you have here in Los Angeles, I mean, tell me about the experience of making Dublab happen here in this city. It seems like the musical environment here would be conducive to anything you'd want to do. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to move here was to be closer to the Amoeba Music Mothership, which isn't so far from here, where we sit, in fact. But what is it about? I mean, do you see Los Angeles itself as offering a lot that, say, a New York or a Chicago wouldn't? Or is it just you guys were at USC, you were here, this is where it happened, this is where it happened to happen?
This is where it happened to happen, and it was, about the right time and the right place, a group of people coming together for the right reasons. But Los Angeles, as I grew to explore the city and understand the city, started to recognize that, in my mind, the greatest commodity that Los Angeles has is space. And that's not just physical space, though it is physical space that allows us to have some breathing room. There's nature here, even from where we're sitting right now in the city. 10 minutes from now, we could be in Griffith Park, which is the nation's largest space-wise public park. We could go to the beach, could go to the mountains, go down to the LA River, and there's nature here. There's space, which allows people to have larger living environments, which allows people to have cheaper rent, which allows people to coast along and sleep on a friend's couch if they need to, or, go to Topanga Canyon and stay in a trailer. So we have that space, but that space also, through, the physical forms, also allows for open headspace. We do have headspace here. And I think that there's a real tradition of experimentation in Los Angeles. There's a real tradition of appreciating and being influenced by our diverse community. Los Angeles is as diverse as you can get. And the fact that in a 30-minute loop around the city here, we can be in Little Ethiopia, we can be in Filipino Town, we can be in Little Armenia, Little Tokyo, Thai Town, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can jump through cultures just by strolling around, or better yet, in Los Angeles, driving around. You're experiencing these different cultures, and it's not a city that lives on the street, but it is a city that offers and has these incredibly diverse cultures. So I feel like it's to plug into that kind of lineage of experimentation, of diversity, of, having that space to play around with things, having that environment. Here, it's, the Hollywood machine is very active. And if you want to jump into the fray and you want to be busy and you want to be a mover and shaker, you can do that. And the sky's the limit. We have a very high ceiling here. But if you want to step away from that for a minute and you want to spend your days surfing or meditating, or, on the flip side, hanging around and, creating a pool of your own vomit. You could do that too. You can go into your call. It's your call, but, you have a lot of options, and those options can allow for a relaxed pace that allows for reflection, or you can just stay busy. So to me, it's a wonderful blend of a lot of different opportunities here. And with the recent years of, rough economic times in the US and worldwide, LA, because of those things, has attracted people from some of these other metropolises that come in and feed into the culture and the very active arts community that we have.
I have thought about Los Angeles and the way you've described the sort of do the loop and you go through the many cultures that there are here. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where I rarely hear English and many times don't speak it. I'll try what Korean or Spanish I have and get by through the day. But Los Angeles as a way to explore the world fascinates me. And music does itself as sort of an easy way if you don't want to or can't buy a plane ticket right away. You can use Los Angeles. You can use music. In the same way as here, you can see a bunch of different times interacting. You can see the old stuff and the new stuff right beside one another. And you can do that in music too. I mean, tell me if you think is it too grand to call music the sort of easiest way we have to travel through time and space from the comfort of our own headphones?
Recorded sound is invisible, yet it somehow can capture the essence of an experience and a culture. We're lucky that recorded music has been around as long as it has, but think about the future. Think about how much incredible opportunity there is in the future now that we've been able to lasso these sound waves and put them into recorded form. That recorded form now is even more invisible than it was before, where it's floating around there in the cloud. But the fact that we've now been able to master that, and this is only for 100 years or so that we've been recording music and that we've been able to kind of capture these heritages, but let's keep making new heritages. Let's keep, creating our own unique forms of culture and passing those on. And the fact that we have the ability to pass them on, let's take advantage of that opportunity to continue to push. I was having a conversation yesterday with one of our DJs, Carlos Nino. We're talking about Folkwaves Records and talking about that vast and inspiring catalog that they were able to create. They were trying to record and to share the entire world of sound. We want to be able to do our part to continue those kind of activities, to continue the activities of someone like John Peel, who was able to, through his radio show on the BBC, reflect a moment in time. And these are all just moments in time. We're never saying, whether it's a radio show that we're doing or it's a record that we're producing, we're not saying this is everything. This is the end all be all of music. Here it is, folks. Let's roll out this carpet. But we're saying it's a snapshot. It's a postcard of a moment. And music does provide that snapshot. It's that insight. And the insight sometimes can be deceiving. The insight of hearing Amazonian tribe in Peru might not be in Peru. It might have been recorded in a studio at the the World's Fair in New York. Right. It might have been recorded in a cultural heritage center in Wisconsin, by students of Peruvian music. So music, you can play with the forms. You can have fun with sometimes the illusion as well. So it can give an accurate glimpse. It can give a window into another world. But on the flip side, which can be fun, I'm not saying it's with the idea of deceit in mind, but you can create a story, you can create a fantasy, you can create a fiction through it. And so it's great to be able to play with all those different angles and let people take from it what they will. And I think that the idea of not being a pusher man, not saying, hey, you've got to like this, you got to buy this, you got to, really buy into this. It's fine. If people do and they want to run with it, then that's great. If they want to keep that door closed, that's fine too. There's other doors to open.
I keep thinking of that analogy you explained, the one saying that on someone's shelf you don't see one type of book and you don't see one type of food in their cabinet, in their refrigerator. But I feel like I do see that with music, that situation happened a lot with music. You do see one type of it. It's as if they had only hamburgers, or if they had only John Grisham novels or what have you. Sometimes, but there's people can say, oh, look at these lame tastes in music people have, but that's less interesting than the question of what is it about music that people tend to use it in that sort of way where we kind of start building our identities with it in high school, and sometimes we then just go on to use it to reflect that identity back to us for the next few decades. It's so easy to break that barrier, but often people don't use music in that way, where they may take a chance on a film or on food or on books. It's less common, at least as I see it in music. In the world of Dublab, it's not that way at all. But is that something that you've noticed as well in the wider world, that music is just a little less flexible in the way people approach it than other types of art?
Music, more than most art forms, is very easily attainable. And nowadays, it's very easily attainable. Say we go back in time 10 years, people are more likely to hear multiple albums, say, a week, or multiple listens to the same album even, than they were to maybe go see multiple films, because of the cost, the accessibility of it, the fact that you can listen to music while doing other things as well. Many people don't own original artwork. So that's something that there is a bit of a roadblock there. They can enjoy art that's around them, whether in a museum or magazine pages or book pages. But music is something that people, as an art form, it seems like they listen to and on a more regular basis. Maybe it's a bit skewed, the concept. People do get fascinated with a certain sound, and they might get stuck in that sound. Even if people who have such deep musical tastes and knowledge, they might just listen to that one record for a month and a month and a month. And
we've all done it.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I feel like I'm exposed to a lot of music, but when I go home, I frequently listen to nothing, or I listen to, certain things that are comforting and that I know. I have the luxury of being around music all day, and music that is new and different. But everybody, has those moments and they want to dive into comfort, and pop music offers people that comfort. Yeah. Some people, it's like, that's what they dig. Some people like sugary cereal, and that's fine. Their teeth are going to fall out eventually, but you could buy new ones. You could. Yeah, you're right. The promise of technology. We're here. The fact is, if you can make it available, do your best to make it available. If you're a listener, you have those options, explore them, poke around, but if you're happy listening to the same thing, listen to the same thing,
I think of that room at KUSC with the 1,500 albums you were allowed to choose from, and I think of the documentary you co-directed, Secondhand Sureshots, and it's this idea of repurposing of music, like of the discarded or the forgotten or the obscure, and finding a new way to use it. Is that a current that fascinates you in music, or is it just kind of something that's happening? I sense that it must be part of Dublab's ethos, the repurposing of music. But do you think of it as that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fascinated with the idea of sampling culture, and when I said before that everything is derivative of something else, that can be in a really literal meaning. Everything can, a new form of art or music can be literally distilled from the form and content of another, and it can be done in a way that the new form is art in and of itself, that it's not just an exact copy and repurposing of it. It's a creative manipulation of, a multitude of pieces to make something totally new. When, the Japanese kind of pop culture and fashion started exploring that and seeing that in the 90s, and seeing the kind of wild things that were being done just in the culture and kind of popular culture there. It was a form of sampling going beyond just the music. It's a form of being so inspired by something that they wanted to make it their own and wanted to use that in a new way. So music itself, I mean, hip hop, that was it. Hip hop and dub and music concrete and all these forms, or even, classical music, the referencing of different movements and themes in new classical pieces. It's been happening in music. It's, call and response. It's all these things that people love to imitate or to reflect something that moves them. I was hearing a radio show years ago that was talking about recorded music, and they were talking about the one of the earliest forms of recorded music could be music recorded in architecture. And it was the music, it was the sound of a bird that I believe it was the Mayans, when they moved from the south up north, they had a bird from their homelands that was a really sacred and special bird to them. I don't know if, they moved and they created these temples that when they clapped their hands, the echo that came back to them was the call of that bird.
Serious engineering for those days. For these days, it would be hard. Serious
engineering. So, I mean, recording sound in and of itself is making a copy of it. So the idea of sampling is just another way to do that, a creative way to do that. So I've always been absolutely fascinated by it, and feel like some of the most creative music I've heard has been music that is music repurposing something else. So being such an avid thrift store shopper and someone who's a treasure hunter, I wanted to be able to crystallize that experience, the thrill of the find. Okay, you found it. Now what are you going to do with it? Have a challenge and be able to put someone up to a challenge. So in this film, Secondhand Sureshots, it was bringing people that we already knew were talented, creative people into a space that was not preset. You walk in the door of one of these thrift stores, you don't know what you're going to find. But
there's going to be some Barbra Streisand probably in there.
There's absolutely going to be some Barbra Streisand. But what else is there? Is there something that you've never seen before, never heard before? Is there something that you've always been hunting for and never found? Okay, you found that record, but is the sleeve empty? Is the record broken? Is it scratched beyond belief? So giving people that challenge, okay, let's go in there and let's find something, and, filming the kind of motivation behind it. Why are you searching? What are you looking for? To be able to kind of capture that experience, and then to be able to take it one step further and say, okay, you found this stuff, and, let's see what you can do with it. Let's see how you can repurpose it. Let's see how you can make it your own. And that was really the point. Let's make it your own. And I feel that through sampling culture and music, you can do that. And so it was to show that on film, not to fully just, validate to everyone, because it's validated to us, it's fine. But to say, look at the creative process behind it, look at the motivation behind it, and then let's hear something totally fresh and new. And it's not just from, the idea of those particular records as, it's what they happen to find, but it's the idea of there's something bittersweet also in the fact that this music was discarded. So let's give it new life. Let's breathe new life into these sounds.
In one of the shots with one of the DJs flipping through the albums out of the closet, he looks at one disc, and when asked, how do you deal with the dust on there? He says, well, it's the seasoning. And it seems like, I mean, tell me if you feel this, but the world itself has, in the last 10, 15 years, realized the dust is the seasoning in some grand way. Like, I remember in the 90s, it was still all about, what sounds the best, what sounds the cleanest, what's the highest fidelity. The technological push was toward maximum clarity, maximum fidelity, and reproduction. And I guess somewhere in the 2000s, maybe the vinyl heads always knew this, but the rest of the world realized, oh, well, things got as clear as they're going to get. Now we're going to have to find some other way to make sound interesting, and it's probably not by making the technology better. I mean, we never really got clearer than CDs, and we realized we didn't need to either. Does that narrative hold up at all in your experience?
Flaws and imperfections and happy accidents can be really great. French dip sandwich was invented this way, the chimichanga.
And we are, of course, in Los Angeles with Coles and Philippe's, one of whom invented the French dip.
Exactly. We'll leave it up to them to fight it out. The perceived imperfections can be, really charming to others. And used records, secondhand records, a record that is scratchy and itchy and dusty, maybe not itchy, scratchy and dusty, that has this seasoning on it. That seasoning can be a record of the previous owners. It can be a record of the former life of that record. To me, certain records, I like them better if they're beat up. I like putting on Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Keys of Life and hearing scratches and pops, because you can then put yourself in the shoes of the person who brought that home from the record store for the first time and put the needle on it and were just blown away. Mm-hmm. So to hear the artifacts of people's listening experience is really nice. Don't always like that. I'd rather, if I'm playing a record, not have it skip. Sometimes a record surface noise can be too much and it can be unlistenable, especially when you're amplifying it really loud or playing it in a club or playing it on the radio. Sometimes it can be good. So there's different varying degrees of it. I've heard music on super hi-fi stereo systems where you're getting just the absolutely immersive full stereo picture of the recording, and that's mind-blowing. But it's every level of it. I think that being able to hear music in many different forms, hearing live music in a great acoustically beautiful environment is really special. Hearing your voice echoing in a cave is really special. Hearing the opposite of it, a really dry, flat sound, a band playing in a room, can be interesting. So music heard in many different environments, heard in many different medias, can change. When you listen to an album, on your earbud, iPhone headset, it'll sound one way, but then to really hear it, on a loud, great system, it's a different experience. So I think that there's no, one way. People argue the fact, it's best to listen to this album in this way. But I think hearing it in a lot of different forms and fashions is great. One thing that I'm excited about the progress of the internet and bandwidth and being able to get, music out there with, wider kind of waveforms and to be able to reach people at higher bit rates will be exciting. I think that as our transmission methods, as well as the playback methods and the technology and the networks advance, which is inevitable, it's going to be a lot of fun to explore, having the option of high fidelity in a purely mobile form, to be able to broadcast to people through the internet and allow them to hear really, really high quality sound will be wonderful. I think that most people's, I'm not a purist in any way, but it is interesting when you realize that our music's been crunched down and all the music we hear at Dublab play, through our stream. Our streams are 128K audio streams, stereo audio streams. And that's okay, but it's really not the best fidelity. It's the fidelity that makes the most sense with people's networks and their technology. But it'll be fun to be able to have the option and be able to play with that. We want to be able to give people a lower bandwidth as well. There's a new service that's really wild that you call up a phone number and you can listen to Dublab, a streaming service where you can hear Dublab over the phone. It's a little funny and it sounds very strange, but I think options are great. And I think that options of listening are great. If you ask someone, would they rather watch a film in a 3D IMAX setting with the most, up-to-date technology? Many people will say yes. Most people will say yes. Do you appreciate the opportunity to lay in your pajamas in bed and watch a film on Netflix? That's great too. It's all just different experiences. So I think that the more opportunities people have to experience music in greater fidelity, that's wonderful. But, you kind of get what you can at the time that you can. If you can have a, solitary walk along the river and listen to an MP3 of a Neil Young album, that can be a really wonderful experience.
Now, when you're going down the street to Out of the Closet or farther down to Amoeba and you're flipping through the stacks of albums, what these days has made your fingers stop, has made you pull it out, look at it, and think, this might be something that I really want to discover? I mean, where the question meaning more, what are the edges of your musical map now that you're really getting excited to push forward?
Sometimes the edges of the musical map are not even necessarily edges. Some of those things are finding the classics. Why are they the classics? When I first really got into, we talked about Neil Young a moment ago, when I first got into Neil Young, and this is records, popular music like that people love. Why do people love it? I want to listen to that. I want to get something out of it. So hearing music, why is, Michael Jackson Off the Wall the best record for a wedding? There's a reason, and let's have fun with that and not steer away from that. So I feel like
you have questions like these that you ask yourself, and maybe you can find the answer by listening.
Yeah, it's good to explore, and I think that it's dangerous to be a completist, and I think that there's something said for being lean and mean, and with the idea of all killer no filler can be good too. Nowadays, we are in a world where music can be lighter than light. It can be invisible and can be weightless. And so there's certain records that I'm content with never owning. And honestly, to be totally honest, I love my records. I love the experience that they bring, but it's not the end of the world if I had no records tomorrow, because there's still plenty of music out there and there's still plenty of access to it. So if I was to, liberate myself from those physical records, that's fine. I'm not looking to do that right now at this moment in my life. But the music itself is the key. There is an absolute thrill in finding something that is new, finding something that is the exact opposite of the tens of millions of Michael Jackson records pressed, or hundreds of millions, whatever it may be, to finding the private press records. There might be 100 copies of that were pressed, and there might be 5 copies of that exist. Myself, as a record fan, when I'm digging through, frequently I dig through thrift store bins, and it's one of the most economical ways to discover music. But again, like I mentioned, it's also that channeling of the experience of the people who owned it before is a lot of fun too. But to come across a record and you can tell in the moment you pick it up and you start to explore it, and you see maybe real handwritten track listings. You find a record label that's maybe based on the person's name, and you start to understand, okay, well, this is probably a private press record. It's a one-off record. It's a really weird, unique, special record. It can be awful. There's pitfalls to private press. There's pitfalls to the quality of it. There's pitfalls to the quality of the recording, the performance. There's a reason that certain things never became popular. But it's also interesting to get a window into a world like that, and to hear someone who is inspired and motivated enough to go beyond recording something and really press it up and make it physical and make sure that someone could discover it, to immortalize it in a way. So those fringe things, I mean, there's right now that is the kind of stuff that I'm really thrilled about. I came across a really good find of music in Palm Springs recently that was pretty obvious. It was one person's collection, and it was a collection.
You have a Celsius Drop show based on this, correct? These finds?
Yeah. I did a show based on these kind of Palm Springs thrift store finds, and I still haven't listened to everything that I found there, but it was a more kind of off-label dance music collection that someone had discarded for some reason, or someone else discarded, for them. But those kind of things, you start to piece together, or at least I do. Maybe it's a weird hobby, but start to piece together the personality. When I come across a collection that it's really obvious that it was one person's, you could either see their name written on it, or you can see a common thread in the genre of the records that you find. Start to think about who that person was and what kind of character they were, what their personality was like. Is it someone I would probably, kind of take to as a friend? Is it someone's very different from me? Who is this person? It's fun to fantasize about those personalities and those histories through music. I get a kick out of it, and I think that's it. It's the seek and you shall find, and what you shall find might be so different than what you were looking out for. I recently was given a gift of about 300 Thai, Persian, Vietnamese, Indian cassettes that were being sold on a San Francisco street corner, and came upon these. My girlfriend's brother heard a guy outside his house selling music for sale, and he went outside and got this huge box of cassettes. All of these things are worth exploring. But again, there's pitfalls in being a completist, and you can also be just absolutely swallowed up in your obsessions as a collector. So personally, I don't want to get wrapped up in that stuff. I have a lot of fun doing it, but it's also really fun, especially in a thrift store setting, to find a $1 record, to find a 50-cent record, and find doubles, triples, quadruples of that, and to pass them on as a gift to someone. There's a Dublab DJ, Turquoise Wisdom, who was working in a record store for a while. And one of his rules in kind of managing this record store was there's always got to be a copy of the Byrds album, The Notorious Byrd Brothers. He said, it's a cheap record. It's something that the record store will find again and again and again and again and again, and they can make available for $1, $2, $3, $4. Make it cheap, make it affordable. If someone comes in the door and wants to find something and wants to have that gateway experience, that's a really good album to do it. And he was passionate about it, so he was able to turn someone onto that record. And I feel like having accessible gateways is really important. With Dublab, that's why we're nonprofit. That's why what we offer is free, and it's to give people accessible portals to discover music. That's why we do this call-in telephone stream of Dublab. Someone doesn't have a computer, they have a way to access us. Probably not used that much, but those kind of things, lowering and deteriorating, destroying the barrier to entry, bringing free music to the community in an all ages venue. That's great too. Being able to really share music with people and have no barrier to entry is important.
I've been speaking at this undisclosed secret location of Dublab headquarters with Mark Frosty McNeill, the co-founder and creative captain of Dublab, the internet radio collective at dublab.com. You can listen whenever you like. And as well, he hosts the Celsius Drop show on Dublab, and he's co-directed that film we mentioned, Secondhand Sureshots. He's produced Dublab albums. He's done so much. Mark, or rather Frosty, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me. And I feel like, we are in a secret undisclosed location. But we have a lot of records around, and if you're one of those cave seekers, you might smell us and come upon us at some point or another. But one of the easiest ways to do it is through dublab.com. So really appreciate the time, and for you and also the world to allow us to share a bit.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. Keep up with all the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to the people backing this season, including Aidan Nullman, Andy Cooney, Ben Bartley, Brian J. Dell, Doubt Us Artwork, Greg Bigelow, Greg Linster, Henry Coronan, Umberto Grant, James Faber, Jonathan McKelmont, Mark Larson, Matt Warren, Mia Muratori, Nicholas Croft, Paul Doyle, Ray McGuire, Rob Montz, Robert Foley, Roberto Medri, Samuel Hansen, Sean Dudley, Small Demons, Stephen Ingles, Steve Himmer, TSD, and Wayne Wright.